Good morning, or is it afternoon? I think it's, yeah, I had dinner. Okay, it's afternoon. This is old 86 again, another little episode here. And I believe we was talking about the power plant where my brother was the general foreman of the instrument department with the Brown and Root construction of what it is well, see, the government hadn't okayed yet to build a nuclear plant.
Actually, I think we've last we were talking about how your brother and you shared an office. Well, and how you were overseeing basically instrument fitting.
Yeah. My brother was the general foreman over the instrument department. Well, they hadn't really started working on the big plant yet, and they had 4 coal burner plants that I guess was putting out too much coal dust or something, kind of polluting the air. Although coal dust, they really work good if it's in a powder. It really gets hot and burns just like gunpowder practically. So anyway, they was going to convert the 4 units, and these units is just about 490 or 500 million kilowatt jobs, just half the size of the biggest ones. Now we're going to build the biggest one, and so what we had to do, or what Brown and Root got contracts on them also, to be a crude oil burner, just like the big one's going to be, to burn crude oil. Well, at the same time, they was building a 1 million gallon storage tank, about 500 feet on back farther, so that when the ships come in, they could just pump that oil into that, see, and that would be if they keep that's a lot of oil. That was a big tank, 1 million gallons. And so this is the setup they was having. And Brown and Root also got the contract to convert the 4 coal burners to burn crude oil instead of coal. So, and they wasn't far enough along. The instrument department was just getting organized. They had all the steel up for this big, well, I like to call it a nuclear plant, but it really wasn't just going to be a crude oil plant to start with, and then when the government okayed it, later on, they would just put a new boiler in it. Well, these boilers are big, huge things, and I guess it'd be a lot of work, but I'm not the one that's doing the planning on none of it. So I'll let them do it the way they want to do it, because that's the way they're going to do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, the foreman on the conversion of the 4 coal burners, Brown and Root had got the contract to convert them to change the burners. Well, all they had to do is very simple. They just had to locate the jets that shot the... See, the way these boilers work, they shoot the fuel in, probably about halfway up in the boiler itself. It's a big, something like a big egg, only it's shaped like a cylinder, the round bottom and a round top. And these boilers are made out of chromoly steel. I mean, the best steel they have, in pipes about 4 inches around, that to carry the fuel, the oil, where it's squirted out into the boiler. Right in the middle of the boiler is where a big ball of fire is, as a result of the 4 jet or streams of jet coming in at the 4 sides. And if one of those jets got plugged or anything, that would make the ball of fire move over to that side, because the pressure would push it over, and if it hit the side, it would burn right through these steel, almost, you know, these thick steel pipes that's it's made out of, the boiler. So they have to be all put in the precision way, so they're balanced. So that center of where they hit in the middle of the boiler would be in the middle of the boiler. So anyway, they sent me down to the general foreman that got the contract to change the burners. So I went there, and he hired me right in and told me to go to work and draw up the plans and everything, and they didn't have no blueprints or nothing. So I went and investigated and marked on the big old boiler there where to mount the burners, and then I had to draw up the plans of where to run the pipes and the instruments for it, and where to run the tube track and all this kind of stuff. So I did that, and drew up the plans to where they had to mount all the tube track and the pipes and everything. And I'd got all that drawn up, and I went into my boss on that one and gave him all this stuff, and he said it's ready to go, and he said, okay, you're fired, and I went, huh? So I got my check, and I walked up to the office of where my young brother was general foreman over the instruments on the big plant, and he hired me right in as foreman. And a little bit after that, I was up there talking to him, and the old man on the job, the big boss over the whole works, walked in, and he shook my hand and welcome, and he said, well, we'll have to look around and find you room enough to build you an office, because they always built sheds and stuff for the offices, or the office of the general foreman, you know, because naturally they have to have a place to do their stuff.
Right.
Well, my brother had already got his office. It was up in the structure in a good spot. And it was a big room they'd built for him. And so he spoke up and said, well, I've got more room than I need up here. So he can have that end and I'll take this end. And I'll have plenty of room. And he'll have plenty of room. And the old man on the job, he said, okay, that sounds good to me. So then he says, you'll have to hire you a secretary. So, well, the personnel office down here, they hired a secretary for me. She came up there and said, well, where will we... oh, I might bring up one thing. My brother had covered every inch on the walls of his office with girly pictures. Well, you know the kind I'm talking about. Oh, well, that was quite inspiring for a man. Of course, it didn't bother me none, but my secretary walked in there and, oh, you know, okay. So we fixed her up with a desk. Is half right on the borderline of, you know, we didn't have a line or nothing there. It was just a room, but we put her desk off midway and on the side. And we was all getting started there. I had my desk on this end, the other end. We worked, and it must have been 3 or 4 days before the secretary said anything about it. And she was very apologetic about it and says, could I take some of these pictures off right here where my desk is? And of course my brother said, well sure, he wasn't hard to get along with. And so she took them off and well, my brother took some off just right a little space there. And the secretary went over and took it off about this much around where she was looking at the wall between her chair and the desk, you know, where she had to look all the time. And that seemed to satisfy her, at least, you know. So everything was really shaping up good. We worked on, I like to call it a nuclear plant because it's going to burn crude oil, and you know crude oil, if you know anything about oil, which I didn't until I learned all about it now, is real thick, and the only way a pump can pump that is if it's hot. If you have to heat up the crude oil to be able to pump it. So every pipe and pump had to be covered with heating wires to heat it, and then insulated so that crude oil would be able to be pumped. So that was quite a job. So the job went on fine. Everybody worked. Well, I won't describe no more of that. I'll just go ahead and tell you a little bit about, well, the job itself. The contract was for 3 years. Now, it takes the 2 plants that I worked at before I was sent up there in Yorktown, Virginia. That's where this is all at. And so I'll tell you a little bit about living conditions and stuff. And can you stop just a
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, ready to go? Well, okay, let's see, I just got to the point where things was working and the job was going along. And so I was going to tell you a little bit about Yorktown, Virginia. Now that was a really interesting area because, for one thing, that's where the Pilgrims landed, right on the coast there. Not in that town, but it was off about a mile or two, where the location of where the Pilgrims first landed in this country. And as kind of a memorial there, they built a little town, and it had a main street and about a half a dozen or more stores on each side. And on each store had a different thing, like there was a gun shop, a clothing store, and things like that. Now, the beauty of it was you could go like the gun shop. I went in there, and you know, they actually made guns in that gun shop. And you could go in there and watch them make a gun. And you know, that's interesting. And it's the same way with all the different stores. They actually did the way the Pilgrims had to live. And then there was another town going north of that area. That was going south. Going north of that area, it was a small town, but it had a kind of a arts and craft center. Now they must have had 3 or 4 big, huge buildings in there. And my goodness, they had the same, almost the same thing as the Pilgrims, but only modern, where they did the same thing practically. And one thing that really impressed me was the section in there. Well, they made lamps, for example, and table lamps. And I really liked this one lamp because it had 2 old-fashioned pistols as the post that held the light bulb and the shade and that. And that really caught my eye naturally.
Right.
And they also had a glass blowing place in there where you could watch them actually blow the different vases and stuff they made out of glass. And almost every trade that you can think of. And if a person is interested in things like that, that is really worth seeing. So we spent quite a few days over there, you know, different days on our days off and that. And between that and James the Pilgrim's place. And then, well, see, the contract was for 3 years, and it takes 4 years to build one, because this is as big as they can build a power plant, because of the size of the generator.
Right.
They only made generators for, I think it was 1 million or 2 kilowatt hours, and that generator was probably the size of a bus or something. Boy, you should have saw them when they had to bring it in on these big trucks and stuff. big heavy generator you can imagine. And that generator in the power plant was on a cement block. And I say block because the block was as big as the generator, and it must have been about 12 feet thick. There's a big 12-foot block of cement, reinforced concrete, where they set the generator on. You know, that's boy, that's heavy and big stuff. So working to be able to get that plant built in 3 years, and this was all in the contract, that we had to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for 3 years. That's 3 years working without a day off. Well, we did it. We got that plant by saying we. There's quite a big crew of people working there. I mean, that's a big job. And but it was good. Oh yeah, that was good wages, because it was right in the contract and everything. We was paid the regular, you know, union type wages for time and a half and double time like that. Double time was time and a half your wage, and I think it's double time for Saturday and Sunday or something like that, or at least Sunday. I forget all the particulars, but it really paid good. And of course, that's why I worked construction. Because way back at the beginning, and I might have already told you this, but the jobs, well, like for example, I was working at a power plant south of there in California. It was in the wintertime. We'd rented a house that was on, looked like telephone posts out in the water. And at night you could hear that water coming in and going out. Well, you know, the back end was in the water and the front end was on the land. We really liked that, or at least I enjoyed it, and I think my wife did too. And but after I'd finished that job, well, I really didn't finish it. I didn't stay till it was finished on that job, because it was in the winter time, and it was cold. And power plants, they don't put the skin on a building until it's done. That's one of the last things they do. And that was cold work. Even though we had a barrel, these 55-gallon drums, that we burned scrap wood and stuff, that we could stop and warm up, but still, it just too cold to suit me, even though I was raised in cold country too. But it wasn't worth it. So I quit there, because I saw an ad in the paper that they needed engineers, electronic engineers with a computer factory. I think it was Honeywell It was a well-known, one of the main computer
Yeah, it was Honeywell.
company. And so I went the next day. Instead of going to work, I quit there. Got paid for a couple of days work and drove over there. That was maybe a 5-mile drive or something like that. But I got over there and they hired me right in, and I was to be the foreman over the night shift. Well, that worked. Well, I went in and went to work, and introduced a few of the guys that was out from a room they had back there that was supposed to be a rest room or something, break room or whatever. I never did even get in it because I only worked that one night. But I'd got they had real good oscilloscopes there, and I got into the most biggest computer that they built to see how any improvements and just how it was put together in that factory and so forth. And I found out they had, like when I was working with the company that that was working for what's the name of that company that's shooting rockets up in the sky?
There are a lot of them that do that.
Well, you know, the one down on the Cape.
Well, there's a government agency that does it. NASA.
NASA. Yeah, so we was working for NASA. And all they'd given me was $2 an hour. That was the going wage, if you can imagine. After making $12 and $16 an hour and stuff like that, working construction, naturally I worked construction. I mean, there's a lot of difference between $2 an hour and about, I think was making almost $20 an hour there at this one that we got in Yorktown. But I went through that computer to see all what it was, how it worked and everything, and by golly, you know, they had some circuit ideas in that computer that us engineers at NASA had built in the big computer at NASA. And what these circuits that we did was, like, for example, now NASA had, I think it must have been their big one was, I think it must have been built in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, because that's when I went to work for a contractor that was doing work there. So I worked actually for NASA on the big computer. See, that's where the big computer was.
Right.
You remember listening to all of them talking when the NASA missiles were going up and that, and they had a little trouble, and they said, well, we'll have to go and listen and see what they say at the computer room. Well, the computer must have been connected to Huntsville, NASA, because that's the one we was working on. It was a big computer, biggest I ever saw. And fact is that computer took up a lot of space on this side of the room, and on the other side of the room they must have had 20 big tape machines for 2-inch tape, recording tapes. And they must recorded everything when they had to shot off these missiles, because all those tape recorders would be working when they had a liftoff. And it was just like, well, it was actually better than being there, because even the yard TV sets that showed the outside views when they'd shift around, you know, the inside and outside, we had a big bank of big screen TVs, or screens. We had one for each of the place that they had the Cape. So we saw everything. And when they had a liftoff, we got to just watch it. It was just like being there, really, if not better.
Want to stop there?
Okay, well, that'll be all for today, and tune in next time.